welcome back to the Hope Show on the road. I have with me Lilly, who's a BCBA, Julia, who's a speech pathologist, Scott, who's a licensed clinical social worker, and Shannon, who's an OT. And we're going to be talking about emotional engagement. And this is probably the most subjective goal that we have, that we work on. And it is something that is hard to really see. In an ABA, that's kind of the challenge, because we want to be able to see observable, objective, and all of that to be able to determine, is this happening? And when it comes to emotions, and it comes to really the social emotional engagement between two people, that gets messy because humans are messy, relationships are messy. But that is kind of the thing that really makes or breaks a relationship. Most people, maybe most, I don't know, what the percentages of people who've ever been in a relationship, whether that be a romantic relationship, whether it be a member of your family, anyone who has, where the other side is kind of emotionally unavailable, or distant or unexpressive, and how that really impacts you, impacts the relationship, and your ability to feel connected, to feel heard, to feel loved, whatever that may be. So while it's the most difficult one, it's the most important when we're talking about the long-term goal of relationships. If that defines our quality of life, and a lot of our clients express their desire just to have relationships, that's the biggest piece. And so we have, we're going to be kind of talking about, a lot of different things regarding it, but kind of going with that first is talking, because it is so subjective in a way, that it's not something that you can train. So Lilly, do you want to kind of talk about that aspect in ABA?
Yeah. I spent a lot of years doing DTT and in other ABA centers, and I feel like they would try to train that emotional aspect, and reinforcing it through objects. Here's an edible, here's your iPad, here's your favorite toy. And how counterintuitive is it to be like, human connection is the most important thing, but here, spend time with your favorite thing, which is a thing, instead of, oh, here's the connection that we made, that's the valuable part, that should be the big takeaway, not, I get 5 more minutes with Candy Crush.
Yeah. I think I think about that in our, even the example of someone being emotionally unavailable, what really cell phones have done to relationships. If you're not careful with that, you become actually attracted, so to speak, to that phone, and that content, and that starts to kind of put a wedge between you, where you become isolated and away, and object focused versus your relationship focused. And Julia, you kind of had a really good example about that process for you in speech.
Yeah, I had a client that when we started doing speech therapy together, he was excited to go to our sessions because he got access to the things that were associated with me. So that would be what we have in our OT and speech gym, like the swing or the mats, and he was really excited to go, but he wasn't excited to spend time with me. He was excited to have access to those things. And then over time, as we spent more time together and we did essentially engagements within my scope of speech, we developed this relationship. And now when I go and get him for our sessions, he's excited by me, by my presence, and not what we do in our sessions is second to he wants to spend time with me. And it was just really cool to see that kind of switch happen. And so now I can, even when I enter the room, I'm not there for him. He will perk up and, want my attention. He'll want me to come over and see what he's drawing or say hi to me, or usually it ends with like, "Are you gonna see me today?" And I was like, "No, next week." He's like, "Oh, come on, like just half an hour,
Yeah.
So, sometimes he tries to sneak that in, but it was cool to see that.
And I think about kind of going on what you talked about with that relationship, the benefit of clinicians that are even though you see them once a week, thinking about that versus the RBTs who, while they spend a bulk amount of time, there is a little bit of change and turnover with that. I don't know if you want to speak to kind of that long-term aspect of.
So the benefit of our setting is that as speech and OT and mental health, we get to see clients. I've been with some of mine since I got here for like a year and a half. I know Julia's been with some of her clients for like 4. And in a normal outpatient setting, you're turning over your clients every 3 to 6 months. So my clients really trust me. They will do things for me that they might not necessarily do for a guide or a new BCBA. So emotional engagement is really objective or subjective because it really has to do with how safe your client feels with you and building that trust in that relationship. So while I might have a client who engages in things with me and I have no problems with them, playing with toys appropriately or giving back fidgets or things like that, with someone new, if they're not emotionally engaged, they don't trust them, it's going to look like they don't have those skills.
And I think that's the challenge in our field, in ABA specifically, but we're all kind of here together at the Hope Source, is that high turnover rate, because you don't get to, build that rapport, build that trust so that I can engage with you, because that is, giving your emotions to people deserves trust. It deserves that respect. And if I don't know if that person's going to be here for me in 2 weeks, why would I give that part of myself? So we really are, with this setup, kind of stretching them. So it's nice to have that long-term, kind of on the clinical level, even in the team supervisors, the people who, where we don't have turnover at that level, they at least have that trust and that sameness for them, so that they feel that they can be a little bit more vulnerable, so they can develop those relationships. But I want to talk about too, like with that aspect of, how vulnerable you really have to be to emotionally engage with somebody. But thinking about, when we think about culture, when we think about the family system, also knowing as clinicians, what does that family system look like? And Scott, kind of, do you want to speak to like what happens when that isn't their background,
Well, kind of going back to what Shannon and Julie said was about building that rapport. We can't gain any trust without building rapport. And a lot of times for our clients, we see fear of failure as one of the main things that we struggle with. Struggle with trust and anxiety due to not being able to build rapport and build relationships. And sometimes that does go back with the family structure. How close is the family? How much do they talk? Who else is involved? How much social supports do they have inside the family or outside the family? So it's a big struggle with that. If they do not have any of those social supports, how are they going to learn to emotionally engage? If mom and dad never emotionally engage and argued constantly, that's the model we see. That's the model they see, and that's a struggle right there. So a lot of that starts from the family home. Is there trauma? Sometimes we don't get everything from mom and dad or from the guardians of our clients, and we don't know. So is there trauma? Is there something else behind that? So there's a lot of ways that we need to build on that rapport and work on that rapport to build that trust. And like we said, it's kind of hard to have any emotional engagement with anybody if you cannot trust them.
Yeah. And I think that that's kind of the important aspect of one, knowing that. But if I if I'm pulling from, like, we're trying to build a skill, right, that we've kind of determined that they're struggling with. And, you know, when we teach the skill, we're trying to relate to something to help kind of ground them. You know, that's what we do in our lives is like, okay, I'm trying to something, how does this relate to something I'm familiar with and I know? Where I might not have the skill yet, but at least I can pull together some of those experiences. And if their home and their life experience is either perpetual failure, which we see a lot of kids coming from the school especially, that environment is chaotic, unpredictable, and people are just mean. And so if I've put myself out there and have failed time and time again, that in itself causes trauma. But on the flip side, if I don't even know where the safest place is the home, and I'm not able to be myself, I'm going to be more fearful to do that in the therapeutic environment. And so it's kind of really our job, you know, to all work together, you know, with the family, with each other, to really identify what the barriers are, you know, to our clients from that deep, very, very intimate level. But it's not something just because it's not super clean, super objective, or observable. It's probably one of the most important things that we do. So does anyone have do you guys have anything else to say? You want to say?
I was going to talk a little bit about one of the important parts of emotional engagement is your therapeutic use of self, or like not over exaggerating, because we all have an ABA voice or an OT voice or a speech voice that we've been taught to use to engage our clients and get a response out of them. But like, it's not always realistic for me to be like, we're going to go to OT today and we're going to do this and it's going to be fun, because that will get a response and you'll get some engagement. But it's not realistic. Like, I don't come to work every day and Casey is like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad you're here. So she should, you're right. But in OT school, we're taught a lot about our therapeutic use of self for buy-in, whether it's an adult client or a younger client. So in our setting, and especially with autism, the really escalated emotional engagement that you're trying to get might be overstimulating for your client. So it's really important to read that and even possibly use yourself as a point of reference for like being regulated and calm during your engagements.
Yeah, emotional. I don't know why we always think we have to be, because there's also that we talked about the you know, the issue with masking, which is a big thing with our clients, and we actually have a lot of clients specifically that we talked about, but that kind of emulate what they think that they're supposed to be doing or saying, and they're supposed to be this positive and you know, really what's the word, like people pleasing, and it's just kind of like and everything sing-songy, but that really could hide a barrier to, like, you know, therapy as a mental health person. I don't want you doing that because I need to know if inside you're hurting, but you are doing this, you've developed the ABA voice, you know, as a way to kind of cope and mask, this is what I'm supposed to be, when I really need to understand deep down what is hard for you, what are you really feeling, and get for you to be able to express. But if I'm trained, or if I'm, you know, because they're going to take that model if they want to, you know, for the individuals who do decide, you know, to mask or being forced to mask or whatever that may be, we have to kind of, you know, show what is natural. And engagement could just be being my rock, being calm, being just there for me. It doesn't have to be this kind of whatever that means. I don't know, this elaborate thing.
I kind of want to go into or off of that.
Yeah.
Going back to that fear of failure. A lot of times, especially in the Terre Haute office where we're strictly outpatient, so we get a lot of people and a lot of kids who have not had that family connection, or have not had any proper positive model towards forward behaviors. And so when we build that rapport and we build that trust, they follow us quickly. That fear of failure also comes into our sessions then.
Yeah.
And so you see people running away and hiding because they don't want to fail that. And then that also carries over into like play activities at school or at home. They're more isolative if they're not having, you know, if they have that fear of failure and things like that.
Yeah, I guess it goes with what we see when they first come, more an object-focused, an isolating aspect, and how can I safely pull you from that? And that's really great. So.
Yeah, I feel like with the ABA voice and with that kind of training, like we were told, and a lot of our guides are told, okay, pair with your client, pair with your client. You can't place any demands until you're paired. And in ABA, that's just the norm. Like, you know that. And I mean, it's true. Like, if you're not paired, you shouldn't be placing any demands. You shouldn't be asking them to do anything because they can't trust you. But in places I've worked before, the idea of pairing, like, what is pairing? Like, it is me associating myself with the things that you find reinforcing. Sorry. So for some of the people, it would be, okay, you did this thing for me, now go jump on the trampoline for 10 minutes by yourself. And then when they say, okay, time's up, they're actually the punisher trying to get them down. They're not building up that emotional engagement, and they're not building that trust. They're taking it away. So, like, that's why when at the Hope Source, we tell them when you're working on emotional engagement, try to stick with a neutral activity. And I've had to talk to so many parents saying, why did my kids say that they folded laundry today? Why did they clean windows today? And trying to explain that to them and say, hey, like, there's times when I'll be doing something mundane, but if it's with the right person, it's the most fun thing in the whole entire planet. Makes me think of one time I went grocery shopping and I saw two old ladies having the most fun grocery shopping I've ever seen, and they were laughing and having fun and throwing grapes at each other and just having the best time. And I was like, I want that. I want that kind of relationship. And that's how you build trust. That's how you pair.
Yeah. Awesome. Does anyone have any questions? Pair with grace. Jake?
Just looking at like some of the goals, like responding to behavior pattern by imitating physical or declarative enjoyment. What does that look like in the therapy setting to like prompt that? Like, does that make sense?
Smile.
So,
Smile,
like,
laugh.
How do I prompt you to imitate my physical or verbal? It might be better in like a role play situation.
Probably. Yes. So, specifically when we, like I said in the beginning, we are trying to take something to that is very subjective and make it objective for so that we can see it and then we can know the best way that we can. It is not awesome. It's not the best, but we try. And so thinking about when I made this one a little bit more, because it used to be more vague, and when I made this specific to understanding what enjoyment looks like, and so kind of defining this outward expression of enjoyment. So for you to recognize when I'm enjoying something, I'm like smiling, or I'm just like, oh, or whatever. I'm engaged, I'm looking at you, I'm doing these things. But if, again, depending on where they are in social communication and social cognition, I might have to be very specific on where you are. So if I'm looking at their ZPD, okay, they know with smiling that means good, positive, happy feelings. So I'm going to go with that. And that is how we're defining enjoyment right now. So that when I take that away, or when it's not happening, not when I take it away, take it away from you. But when I'm no longer doing that, then that's a signal for you, okay, that's gone. And so it's not really, as we're trying to reinforce it, it's such a slow process, and emotional engagement is one of those ones that we just have to be careful. It has to be slow because of that trust that comes with it, so that it's not a trained thing. I know that we've had in the past, counselors even saying, like, when we label it and then over and over and over, it's the same label, the client is labeling other emotions that they think might be that. And so it just can't be, that's why the harm in training really is, but taking that simple, like, this is what this is. It doesn't take much to be connected. But it's our way of being as objective as possible on something so subjective. So,
I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Shannon was saying, because as someone who's worked mostly with the high schoolers, I feel like I've gotten better outcomes and responses than more ago when I talk to them like adults, because that's how they want to be treated. And so if I talk to them like an adult, all of a sudden it's like, oh, you respect me, like that's how they feel. So I feel like we're able to get more done. And I've even had a client before be like, I can just tell one day we're doing something and something will happen and I'll stop our activity and just be like, okay, what's going on? I can just tell something's off today. And they've just told me like, I feel like I have to perform for you and I can't perform today and I feel like I'm just doing everything wrong. And so then I started doing, okay, I don't expect you to perform, this is not a test. Now I'm going to ask you, are we having a good brain day or a bad brain day? Of our sessions, and that's just going to let me know how much I can challenge you, and that really helps.
yeah, it's a great way to build trust. Thank you. Okay, thank you all.